Secrets of the Obscure, Guild Wars 2's latest expansion, is the first expansion in the game's 11-year history to change how content is delivered to players. Since the game came out, the release schedule for content in Guild Wars 2 has been entirely inconsistent. Now, after 11 years, Anet wants to change that inconsistency and release smaller expansions on a yearly basis. Theoretically, this is amazing news. Content in Guild Wars 2 getting released on a regular, predictable schedule, it's been unheard of until now. But I couldn't help but feel pretty anxious when I first read about this change. Ever since the layoffs in 2019, Anet has really been falling behind on their content releases. It's no coincidence that War Eternal was written as if it could have been the ending to Guild Wars 2's story, because it almost was. While the Icebrood Saga was being released, Anet announced they were working on End of Dragons by posting this picture in one of their blog posts. It soon became incredibly obvious that Anet did not want to make End of Dragons when they did, after Champions came out and was some of the worst content the game had in a long time. Now, compare that to the present. Anet once again announces they are changing how content gets released. The release leading up to the expansion is extremely poorly received by the players, and the community is justifiably worried about the quantity and the quality of the content going forward. Despite my own anxiety, I wanted to remain neutral in my judgment of SOTO and not go into the expansion with any expectations beyond what was announced to be in the game at release. I also didn't want to criticize the game for what it could be, but rather what it is. At this point, it's clear that the game will never return to its former glory, but you know what? That's just okay. I've been playing this game since the open betas, and I love this game with my whole heart. I've played through every content release and every content drought. I don't think there's really anything that'll make me quit the game entirely. Even if I ever take a break, I know I'll come back to play through the next release, and every piece of content I've enjoyed in the past is still there for me to enjoy whenever I want. All that being said, let's take a look at my experience and thoughts on Secrets of the Obscure. The two new maps and the new player hub that were introduced with this expansion have been pretty good overall. Design-wise, I think Anet did the best with the resources that they had. A lot of the assets in the new expansion are reused. You could probably point out all the new assets they added to the game on both hands. However, the reused assets don't really break my immersion for the most part. In Skywatch, it's intentional given the context behind the map. In Omnitas, it's not a huge problem, but all of the islands looking pretty much exactly the same does break my immersion a little bit. I just find it difficult to believe that the wizards in the Bastion of Strength would have the same taste in decor as the wizards in the Bastion of the Natural. There are a few cool and unique rooms in Omnitas, but they are few and far between. I do like the overall aesthetic of all the new maps, but I hope the third map ends up being a bit more unique, since the map will be set in Nyos, the Demon Realm. Also, I've got to say, traveling and exploring the new maps was a lot of fun. I especially enjoyed taking my Griffin to the higher points in both maps and flying between the islands. I've wanted maps like these ever since the Griffin was introduced to the game, and now we have them. However, one thing I despise about the new maps, especially Omnitas, is how goddamn laggy they are. I don't understand the specifics of why these maps are so laggy, but it really dampens my enjoyment of anything I do while in any of these maps. As far as I know, the reason why the new maps are so laggy is because everything on the map is visible at all times. I genuinely wish that Anet would just put a fog blocking parts of the environment out after a certain distance away. I don't think this would be immersion breaking either. World of Warcraft does it, and Guild Wars 2 should do it too. Please, Anet, save my frame rate. The two new meta events introduced with the release of this expansion are both pretty good. I'm a little biased when it comes to metas though, because my favorite metas are the ones that are quick, have like one unique mechanic, and otherwise only require you to whack the boss for a little bit. Some good examples include the night bosses in Verdant Brink, Octavine in Auric Basin, and the Chak Garant in Tangled Depths. Weird how all of those are from Heart of Thorns. Anyway, the SOTO metas have a lot of running around, which tends to be my least favorite part of doing a meta event. The boss fight sections of these metas are okay, but they aren't super interesting. Not that Octavine is super interesting either, but at least the lead up to whacking the thing is fun. Of the two, I think the mechanics of the Omnitas meta are far more fun than the mechanics of the Skywatch meta. I am really not a big fan of doing the same thing twice in the same meta unless it's quick, and both metas make you do the same thing twice, and it's not quick. Skywatch is far more offensive in this regard because most of the last part of the meta is the same crap with no interesting mechanics. Just fight some dudes, collect some orbs, and repeat. It leaves the same bad taste in my mouth that Guyla Delves does, but to a lesser degree. However, overall, I think they are a fun addition to the daily meta train, and a lot of people seem to like them, so yeah, they're pretty good. The new mastery lines thus far have been a little bit lacking. I'm a big fan of the flight training mastery, which gives new abilities to the Skyscale and Griffin, such as enabling them to use ley lines and updrafts. However, the other two mastery lines that are out right now, the Heart of the Obscure research line and the Astral Ward line, are reminiscent of past mastery lines that only exist to gatekeep new players of the expansion from getting all the new stuff sold by the vendors right off the bat, or to limit how much loot you get from doing things in the expansion. 3/4 of the Astral Ward line is precisely this, hence why I still haven't gotten max mastery level back since the expansion came out, which isn't true anymore. I did get it. Well, that, and for some reason, there's a significant scarcity of mastery points that aren't tied to annoying to get achievements. I'm hoping that the 4th mastery line that's currently in development will be more gameplay changing, but that remains to be seen. Rifts are a new form of content introduced with the expansion, wherein your character uses the Heart of the Obscure to locate a rift created by the Cryptus, goes to the location of the rift, fights a bunch of Cryptus, fights a bigger Cryptus boss, and then finally closes the rift. Rifts have no cooldown, come in 3 difficulty tiers, and give rewards that are used in crafting the new set of open world legendary armor, as well as some other stuff to convert to gold. According to the Fast Guild, Tier 1 rift farming is the most profitable at about 20 gold per hour. And bizarrely, Tier 2 and 3 rifts are way less gold per hour, even when you aren't the one using motivations to open the rifts. Oh yeah, did I mention that to open a Tier 2 or Tier 3 rift, you have to craft an expensive item that ultimately loses you gold, or else you have to rely on someone else opening them for you? Also, the essences that are used to craft the new legendaries are account bound and therefore can't be sold. But you can use them to craft Cryptus motivations, which are not account bound and are effectively how players are selling their essences to others. Now, I haven't tracked the gold per hour myself, and I really don't want to, so I'm trusting Fast on this one. But holy crap, if these numbers are even close to accurate, this is just an abysmally bad decision on Renet's part to design rift rewards like this. The whole point of farming is to make gold, not lose it. It also doesn't help that Anet couldn't seem to decide whether or not they wanted essences to be a currency or a crafting material. At launch, there wasn't even a spot for them in your material storage, and you get so many of them that you'd think they should have just gone into your wallet as a currency, especially when you consider that they are already account bound. To me, it just makes no sense for them to be an account bound material. Either make them a currency and put them into the wallet, or make them tradable between players. Maybe ArenaNet will change it in the future and the essences are only account bound temporarily so that the economy doesn't explode with the introduction of a very easily farmable material exclusively introduced to the game so more players could get legendary armor, or maybe the legendary armor itself won't be account bound on acquire. If that's the case, then I get it, but only time will tell. Now for possibly the most important question of all. Are rifts fun? The answer, in my opinion, is no. Rifts are only slightly more fun than bounties were in POF, which isn't saying much. I know some players in the game enjoy an endless grind, after all this is an MMO, but rifts aren't nearly as rewarding as they should be for how boring they are to do. Rifts probably wouldn't be so bad if they didn't seem to spawn on complete opposite ends of the map at times, and if some of them weren't bugged and only spitting out 1 or 2 Cryptus at a time during the first event. But ultimately, rifts are just not my cup of tea in terms of content. The Wizard's Vault is a system introduced with Soto that replaces the old daily system, including login rewards. When the expansion first launched, there were only 4 dailies instead of the usual 12, although one of those dailies is just for logging in. After a lot of complaints from the community, Anet added 1 more daily to choose from, and while you only have to complete 4 dailies to get the daily reward chest, you can still get the astral claim by completing the 5th daily. Even after this change, the community continued to complain that it wasn't enough. Personally, I am a huge fan of the new daily system. In the past, I never bothered with doing dailies on a regular basis. The rewards back then just weren't super compelling to me, since I essentially got half the value of the current reward system just by logging in and doing nothing. Anet definitely made the decision to limit the amount of dailies that are available because they want to direct players better. They want players to do specific things in the game because they don't want to overwhelm players with choices. The problem is, that goes almost directly against what Anet's philosophy has been from the very beginning, which is essentially to allow players to do whatever they want. Reducing the number of dailies from 12 to 4, excluding the daily you get just for logging in, is a pretty blatant restriction on player choice. However, I think that narrowing down the amount of dailies helps to funnel players to content that they wouldn't normally do in the old system. It was incredible seeing so many players do the mini dungeon in Setung, for example, which is content that I didn't even do back when EOD came out. Also, I can't speak for the World v World or PvP dailies, but the PvE dailies are incredibly easy and able to be completed in less than 15 minutes max. The new weeklies that were added into the game are also incredibly easy, just a bit more time consuming than the dailies. Anet knows that Guild Wars 2 players are very casual and can't always dedicate a huge amount of time to the game, and the Wizard's Vault reflects this. Additionally, the Wizard's Vault is ridiculously rewarding, far more than the old system. On top of actually encouraging players to play the game to get rewards, the rewards are actually good. There are items that were previously only available via the gem store, exclusive cosmetic items, and most importantly, lots and lots of gold. I find it a bit hard to be upset about the Wizard's Vault when the rewards are this good and I'm having more fun doing dailies than I ever have. Also, Anet, please just bring back the pop-up chests. I know you removed them to force players to click on the menu and make the cute little ding sounds, but you know, you can keep that sound effect and slap it onto the bouncy chest. We really don't need to open the menu and click on the thing to get the dopamine. But overall, I think the Wizard's Vault is a huge win, and I look forward to seeing what unique rewards get added in the future. Weaponmaster Training is a new feature in SOTO which allows you to use any weapon on a class that was previously restricted to that class's elite specializations. This means that now you can be a sword warhorn wielding catalyst or a great sword wielding herald, for example. Doing this created a bit of a balanced nightmare for ArenaNet when the expansion came out, as there were a few weapon/elite spec combinations that were just a bit too powerful. As of right now, the power creep is still in effect with many of the top benching builds hitting well over 40k DPS. To be honest, I'm not sure if Anet wants it to be like this or not. If power creep continues to be a problem, then past content will become more and more trivial with time as bosses die faster than ever before. However, some of the new content introduced with SOTO has a lot of health for no discernible reason. Seriously, the boss in Cosmic Observatory on normal mode has more health than Junkyard on challenge mode. I don't know if this was just an oversight or if it was intentional, but either way, it's annoying to deal with. In my opinion, ArenaNet should scale back everything so that 40k DPS is the max, and they should reduce the health of the new strike bosses to go with it. But I digress. At first, I thought Weaponmaster Training would allow for more build diversity like Relics have done, but unlike Relics, Weaponmaster Training has more or less missed the mark in that regard. Now, for example, every power build on Elementalist runs Sword Warhorn, regardless of elite spec. A similar trend has befallen the rest of the classes as well. Technically, nothing is stopping you from running whatever you want, but in terms of what is meta, the list of recommended builds has become much shorter. I would really like to see Anet make balanced decisions that bring underperforming weapons back up to speed, as well as bring overperforming weapons back in line. But I'm not going to keep my hopes up for that, as nice as it would be. Relics are a new type of equipment introduced with this expansion that provide a special effect to your character, which was previously included in the 6th tier bonus of runes. Runes now no longer have this bonus effect as it has been replaced by relics. Runes, however, still exist to give your character bonus attributes to their armor. Theoretically, the creation of relics should increase the diversity of builds, utilizing different relics for different situations. And for the most part, it looks like relics have hit the mark with their intended purpose. That being said, there are a few relics that are just plain better than the rest because they give you a bonus to damage in some way, which in high-end PvE is really all you care about. If you don't care about that though, there are plenty of relics to choose from that give you something unique, which you can use to spice up your gameplay a little bit. If you find choosing a relic to be overwhelming, I would recommend watching Mighty Teapot's video on runes and relics to help you get started. Overall, I'm really excited to see what types of relics we get in the future, because relics could be a great way to change how players interact with the game and create their builds. The two normal mode strength missions that are out right now, Cosmic Observatory and Temple of Phoebe, are both of middling difficulty with a couple of new mechanics in each. Cosmic Observatory is a mechanically very easy fight with a boss that has an absurd amount of health for some reason. I mentioned this back when I talked about Weaponmaster Training, and I mean seriously, why does this boss have so much health? I didn't feel the health pool as much on the Temple of Phoebe encounter, since that fight has some interesting mechanics to keep you busy with, but on Cosmic Observatory, it's just painful. That's really my only complaint with this fight though, besides how basic it is, but I think it's important to have one basic fight every now and then so the average Guild Wars 2 enjoyer can do it. Temple of Phoebe, on the other hand, is a very fun fight that has great potential for a somewhat difficult, or at least interesting, challenge mode down the road. The fight has some mechanics that nothing else in the game has, which is what I like to see. Also, the boss is neat. There's much more that I could say about the state of instance endgame content in Guild Wars 2, but at this point I've given up that raids will ever make a return, and have come to accept strike missions and the occasional fractal as a decent replacement. Ultimately, Guild Wars 2 is just not a game meant for hardcore MMO players, and that's okay. I've really come to appreciate Guild Wars 2 for what it is recently, especially because I don't have as much free time as I used to have while I was in school. I can still enjoy the instance content when I want, because it's all still there, and Arena is adding new instance content to the game, albeit at a much slower rate than other MMOs, but there's really nothing wrong with that. This time around, there are a couple of new armor sets, weapon sets, and a few unique skins. I'm pretty disappointed that the armor sets look the same for each armor weight, and I'm a little concerned that this will be the new norm going forward. I always liked that light, medium, and heavy armor have a unique style to them, but the lines between weights are becoming more and more blurred as time goes on. The Cryptus weapon set is disgusting. The Shattered weapon set is really nice, although I wish the animation for the floating bits weren't wiggling around as fast because it looks a little off. The Sanctified weapons look pretty nice, but they're a bit too bulky for my taste, and they are very, very similar to the Paladin's Decree weapons. At first, I thought the Skyscale weapons looked really weird and more like they belonged in World of Warcraft than Guild Wars 2, but I like how unique they look, and I'd probably use them if I can find a use for them. I also like most of the unique weapons, and I'm definitely going to use a couple of them on my characters. Adventures, my beloved. A wonderful idea initially introduced to Guild Wars 2 back in Heart of Thorns. Each adventure back then was totally unique, and they were meant to encourage players to get to the top of the leaderboard, or to just play casually in between events for some extra experience, or to literally just do a couple times to get gold on and then never touch them again. However, the leaderboards for adventures were never very useful. They only show you where you are compared to your friends and guildmates, so you can't see the entire leaderboard. And Guild Wars 2 players being the way they are, they weren't too excited about anything to do with competition. As such, when adventures made a comeback in Path of Fire, not too much thought was put into them, which has been a continuing trend in every release involving adventures. Until now! Oh wait, just kidding. They're still lackluster. That being said, I do think the Soto adventures are fun for what it's worth. They're no Tendril Tortures or A Fungus Among Us, but they're pretty good. They're a lot better than the incredibly boring fetch quest-like adventures that we got with Path of Fire, but they aren't quite as good as the Griffin Trials. I'm glad to see that this wasn't a feature that got left behind though, because it very easily could have been, considering how small Soto is compared to past expansions. I'm looking forward to seeing what new adventures we might get in the future. Hopefully they don't all have to do with riding your sky skill around. And finally, last but certainly not least, the story. In case you still haven't played through the story yourself, I'll be giving a short, mostly spoiler-free review of the new story introduced with the expansion. It's nothing mind-blowing, but for Guild Wars 2 standards, it's exceptional. We're not taking into account that this is a story written for a half-dead MMO by a bunch of devs that are constantly racing to put content out on time. The story is still good, and at the very least, enjoyable. The characters are mostly well written, but would definitely benefit from more characterization. The game suffers from not having enough time to devote to giving characters a proper, complete personality, but dare I say this is not an excuse to have any boring or wooden characters. Considering the existence of side quests, events, and books, the devs have more than enough tools they can use to explore some characters' thoughts and behaviors when there isn't enough time to do so in the story. Even without these tools, good characters can be created and portrayed in a matter of minutes. Take, for example, Forging Steel. This is the story instance in Guild Wars 2 where the characters actually feel like people and not just devices used by the devs to push a storyline. That's not to say that this hasn't happened before, but unfortunately most of the time the characters in Guild Wars 2 are really just there to tell you what is going to happen next or how to fix whatever problem the commander is currently facing. In Soto, some of the characters lack a tangible personality, but this time it's so they can lore dump on you. Personally, I don't mind lore dumping, but too much at once can be overwhelming, which makes it hard to interpret the important parts of the information being given to you. Given the story takes place in a new, unfamiliar area with a new, mostly unfamiliar cast of characters, the story has a difficult time keeping a balance between lore info and character development. This shouldn't be an issue since it is possible to convey important information while also allowing the character delivering this information to show off their personality. But this is Guild Wars 2. I can't speak too much on how well the new lore fits in with existing lore or if there were any retcons, but talking too much about that would be delving into spoiler territory anyway. I'd rather just leave stuff like that to people who are far more familiar with Guild Wars lore overall. But for what it's worth, I didn't get the sense that any of the new lore was out of place. Everything new sits pretty well within the realm of possibilities in the world of Tyria, from my perspective. The only thing I didn't really like about the story is how obvious the padding between certain sections of the story is. The story forces you to do events or rifts between a few instances, which in Anet's defense is a good way to get players to not just bum rush the story and instead take some time exploring the new maps and taking in some parts of the story from there. However, I felt like this could have been done more gracefully. Perhaps have players find a few lore books in specific locations, talk to different story NPCs in the world, or have players do particular events that relate in some way to that part of the story. I think having players do the meta in each map is a great idea, but doing rifts over and over again in order to progress the story gets stale. Overall, despite the struggles, I really did enjoy playing through Soto's story, and I look forward to playing through it again sometime in the future. I hope the devs continue to develop the personalities of the new characters introduced with this expansion, and I hope the story continues down the path it's headed. As of right now, the choices we've made as the commander, or wayfinder in this case, and the choices our new companions have made thus far are shrouded in a mist of ambiguity and moral grayness, which I would like to persist into the next chapters, but we shall see what lies ahead. There's a lot more I could have talked about here, but I felt like I said enough already. I think Soto overall was a good expansion that did what it set out to do, but it still felt rushed and seems to lack a distinct sense of identity. Or perhaps I should say that Soto does have its own identity, but it definitely stands out the least among all of the expansions. That could potentially change when all the content in the expansion finally gets released. I think releasing content in this new way has potential to be done well, but Soto's release feels much weaker in terms of the impact that the content has on the game. It's difficult to say right now whether player engagement will go up in the long term with a new release schedule, but I do think this is something that Anet has considered when making this decision, and it's not a decision they took lightly. All the content introduced with the expansion is pretty good, and I don't have many big complaints about anything. There's definitely some room for improvement, but I'm not expecting anything significant from Anet going forwards. Guild Wars 2 is a very old game at this point, so it's a miracle it's lasted this long, especially considering there's no sub fee. For my final score for Secrets of the Obscure, I give it a 6 out of 10. Above average, but not that outstanding. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. I've played Guild Wars 2 for a significant part of my life, and it's very near and dear to my heart. I'm not really sure why now of all times I felt compelled to make a video like this for the game, but maybe it has something to do with the hardcore and semi-hardcore communities showing telltale signs of decay. Guild Wars 2 content creation scene hasn't really ever been that large since a lot of players just don't support it, and it's certainly not getting any better. I may or may not make any more videos like this in the future. To be honest, it's amazing that I finished this video at all, having little to no editing experience or frankly motivation to work on this video. It took a lot of time and effort, which has definitely cultivated a newfound respect in me for creators who make videos like this. So again, thanks for watching and I hope you enjoyed.